So you're slowly getting the hang of your bolt, but you've been wondering in the back of your mind, can I engrave paper on that bolt? You most certainly can. I'll give you my settings, and I'm also going to show you a really cool feature in Lightburn I never paid attention to until now. Today on Laser Nug. Welcome back to the shop. If you're anything like me, I'm kind of risk averse. And of course, as you know, this is my first laser, and I've been getting used to it over the last number of months, trying to expand my knowledge and experience, but I've stayed away from paper products because the idea of putting a very intense, focused heat source on a piece of paper was not something I wanted to try, especially with my lack of experience, until somebody asked me if I could do it for them. We're going to use some simple, common cardstock. It's white. We're going to jump into Lightburn. We're going to do a simple, recipe design because that tends to be a popular item. And I'm also going to use a feature in Lightburn I've never paid attention to before, and I'll show you where it is, and I'll show you the effect it gives you. Let's get into Lightburn. So given that we're going to do a little bit of an engraving on cardstock, recipe card was a great test idea, I thought. A couple of different fonts in here and different sizes. So I just grabbed a recipe, I brought it in, I think as a JPEG, I did the trace function, and I have myself something to engrave and test with. Here are my final settings that I've been using. We come down here under my materials library, my engrave settings, 200 millimeters per second, 10% and 10% power, no air. I know, it's paper, but no air. Fill mode, 300 lines per inch, one pass. So let's just assign that to my fill layer here. Engrave and assign. There we go. My cut settings, 200 millimeters per second, 40% power, high air, line mode, one pass. But here's this really cool feature which I've not paid attention to for 14 months. Right here in your cut layer, when you change to line mode, you'll see you've got a perforation mode option. And that's exactly what it does. If I leave this as a regular cut, it will just cut the paper out as you would cut out any material. But maybe people are making, recipe cards, or they're doing welcome cards for gifts they give, or they're making name tags that slide into that little holder you clip on your shirt at a conference or an event, and they need a number of different cards or units per page, and maybe you want to provide it to them in a page format with 10 on a page. This is exactly what you think it is. It, instead of doing a clean cut, it does a perforation. We'll take a look at it afterwards. I believe this is probably in inches. I have found that you've got a cut, and then there's how much space you want to use to skip. So these are adjustable. I haven't played around with this too much, but let's just turn these up a bit because that's awfully tiny for a perforation. Let's leave that here, and let's assign it to my line level layer here. Here we go. Okay, we're in good shape, and I've got my design. The bolt is on, and let's throw some cardstock in there, and let's see how clean it engraves. A few things I've learned so far through my testing. You want to make sure you have a spray bottle of water close to the laser, especially if you're testing settings. I'm pretty confident in my settings because I've used them multiple times now, but I still keep it handy. And for reference, it's the first time in 14 months I've ever put a water bottle beside the laser. But it's paper. You're also going to want some magnets or something to hold the paper down and flat. It's cardstock, so it may not be perfectly flat when you lay it in the laser. So I just use magnets in the corners just to make sure that I'm keeping a level surface. Let's do this. So there's nothing different that you do with paper that I can think of. You keep it flat, do your autofocus, set your origin, frame it, and then run your job. And here's our finished product. This is right out of the laser. I, of course, have not wiped this because being white paper, probably not a good idea to wipe it too much. And of course, unlike other materials, you can't squirt it with something and clean it. So in trying to perfect those settings, I had to keep working back and forth to a point where I can engrave it and there's no residue whatsoever. You'll notice there's no residue, any scorching around the cut line. There's no residue or debris on any of the engrave, and it's got a nice consistent coloring all the way through. Turned out really nice. I used the 1.5 inch lens. I have not tested the 2.5 yet, but I may. But with the 1.5 inch, as always, you get that finite detail. Very clear, consistent letters. It really shows how clean and tight and detailed and crisp that 1.5 inch lens produces. But that's your result. Safe, easy, no flare-ups, no scorching, no burning. In contrast, there's a picture I did. And if we just focus in on this, I can actually feel that engrave. But again, you'll notice there's no debris, no scorching, no discoloration on this white paper. I think the settings, or at least, are great starter settings if you want to try it out yourself. It's consistent. You'll notice that where you have areas with thicker lines or perhaps more engrave area, there's a slight darker color, but I think that probably just accentuates those heavier areas versus those very light wispy areas that you see there. But that's what she looks like. A few more things before I wrap up for you today. I just wanted to offer a few suggestions or a little bit of experience from my own testing when I got to these settings. You're probably thinking, GP, 200 millimeters per second is pretty slow. And maybe there are more efficient settings that you can come up with, but hopefully these give you kind of a base or a place to start or a safe place to start. What I found is if you increase your speed or your power, you end up with a number of different results. And what I'd offer is that paper products or cardstock will respond similarly to any other material that you try to create settings for. If your power is too high, you'll get scorch marks, you'll get more debris, residue from the laser. And on some materials, that's not a big deal because you sand it off or you clean it off with LA Awesome or whatever type of cleaner you use. But of course, this is paper. So if you have any scorch marks on that white paper or any type of residue, spread across the paper from the laser's heat, you can't really clean it off. You can hit it with an air gun, but you're not going to get it all out of the fibers of the paper. So your settings, in order to get that clean, an engrave, myself, I just found I had to adjust both. And the speed was one component because the faster it goes, the more power you need to throw on it in order for it to hit it properly. If your power setting is too high, you're not just going to get scorching, but you're going to see that the engraved portions, and I wish I'd kept an example, your engraved portions will actually look burned. And if you look closely under the magnifying glass, you'll see that the fibers have been burned instead of engraved or colored. It's a big difference, and you'll notice the difference and you'll be able to tell in your settings as you try to test or change your different power and speeds or LPI. You can clearly see where it's burned versus where it's just got a really nice engrave to it. So a couple of things to watch out for. And lastly, the perforation. Really cool feature, especially for this type of thing. Somebody wants a bunch of welcome cards for gift giving. You put them all down on one sheet, perforate them instead of cut them out, and that way you can send them the sheets as a product and they can undo them themselves. The perforation works really great. And you can adjust both the length of the cut on the perforation as well as the spacing between each perforation. It's a pretty cool feature. Haven't needed to use it until now, but hey, we're perforated instead of cut. I think it's an excellent little feature in there. Never paid attention to it for the last year. I'm pretty sure I saw it a few times, but I really didn't pay it any mind until now. You use the exact same cut settings as you would for cutting your cardstock. You just click that perforation on, and then you try to determine your settings. And after you run a few test pieces through, you'll get exactly the settings you want. You can either make them big, long perforations with small spaces or vice versa. Whatever it is that suits your product or your creation. So hey, I think that's a wrap. Thanks again for hanging out with me today. If you haven't tried cardstock or paper products, give them a try. You may have a design idea that you've been kicking around in your head, and paper or a paper type product might fit into that design. Have a great week. Have fun with your lasers and please be kind. I'll see you again right here. I'm Gord Potter and you've been watching Laser Nug. Cheers.